Hello to everyone currently joining us. We're just going to wait for everyone to get settled in. Feel free to respond via the chat function. Let us know who's out there. I can see lots of people joining us, which is excellent. Just give everyone a couple more minutes before we get started. As I said, do feel free to let us know via the chat function so we know who's out there. Say hi. If you do have any questions, that is where to put them. Hello to David. So I think we might be ready to get going. I know a lot of you will have been expecting Adriano from the Low Carbon Hub. Unfortunately, he wasn't feeling 100%. So my name is Zoe. I'm the marketing coordinator at the Low Carbon Hub. And I'm going to just introduce Mel here and take some of the questions later on during the webinar. Great to see it. We've got, oh, Malcolm's here. He did our last webinar. You might have joined us for that. Great to know he's there. Excellent, lots of people there. So let's see. So good evening to everyone. I hope you're all ready for this really interesting, exciting webinar. As I said, I'm Zoe, marketing coordinator at the Low Carbon Hub. And the Low Carbon Hub is the Oxfordshire-based social enterprise that's out to prove we can meet the UK's energy needs in a way that's good for the people and good for the planet. You're joining us tonight for the third in a series of webinars, which are all focusing on the future of energy and the transition to a renewable energy future with a particular focus on Project Leo. For those who don't already know, Project Leo is Local Energy Oxfordshire. It's a £40 million project conducting real-world trials to understand the role local energy can play in accelerating the transition to a zero-carbon energy system. As I mentioned last week, we were joined by the wonderful Malcolm McCulloch, who gave a great talk on the energy system transition and how we could work towards a better local solution. We had a fantastic turnout for that. It was really great to see so many of you there. If you didn't get that and if you did miss it, it is on our YouTube channel at the moment, which you can find through our website or direct on YouTube. Let's have a look. So we are recording tonight's webinar. As I mentioned, so we can put it on YouTube so that everyone gets a chance to have a look at it. There are more details and registration links for upcoming webinars on our Facebook page and on our website. It's going to be Community Energy Fortnight, which will be starting in a couple of days. So we've got lots of things happening for that. We'll have a couple of webinars coming up from Scott Wheeler and Tom Heal, University of Oxford and Low Carbon Hub respectively, discussing the smart and fair technical trials that are happening in Oxfordshire and Grand Mount Solar in Oxfordshire. And on the 16th of June, we're also going to be hosting a community coffee morning as part of Community Energy Fortnight, and it's going to be an opportunity for various community groups from around the country to hear a bit about what we're doing in Oxfordshire and also to share their ideas and how they've been responding to the current COVID crisis and keeping sort of the environment and renewable energy in the forefront of people's minds. Okay, with that all said, our topic tonight is a network for net zero, Project Leo in its first year. And I'm really delighted to introduce our speaker, Melanie Bryce. Mel is the Oxfordshire Programme Director at Scottish and Southern Electricity Networks, SSEN, and she's the lead on Project Leo, Local Energy Oxfordshire. As a chartered engineer, Mel has spent her entire career in the energy industry, spanning roles from asset management to investment and regulation. A lifelong passion for the energy industry has led to working on Project Leo. Previous projects have included running the installation programme for primary substation works across the asset management portfolio and advising on the replacement profile for subsea cables. Mel said she's happy to take questions throughout this webinar. We do have some slides where we'll break and just pause and do our best to pick up all the questions. If you do have any questions, it will be best to sort of focus and put them in the chat. And as I said, we'll try and answer as many as possible as we go through. Yeah, please ask as many and interact and engage with us as much as possible. Over to you, Mel.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Zoe. Thanks for asking me along to do the webinar. It's something I've been looking forward to, being able to share the journey that SSEN has come on with the Low Carbon Hub in developing LEO. So I've just been introduced, so I don't have to go through my background. I'm going to be talking to you today about SSE and SSEN, Project Leo, its first year, and then COVID-19 and the impact that that has had on parts of the energy industry, and also what we're hoping for from the green recovery. So SSE, obviously a FTSE 30 company, and we have aligned our sort of corporate vision to the sustainability goals from the United Nations. So the UN have 17 sustainability goals, and we've aligned our corporate vision to 4 of them. So the 4 that we've aligned them to are the climate change, so one on climate action, one on affordable clean energy, and one on the industry, innovation and infrastructure, and then another one on decent work and economic growth. So these are the things that we really see as being at the forefront of what we want an energy company to be going into the future. And we're looking at cutting our carbon intensity, so that's from our generation portfolio, trebling our renewable energy output by 2030. And then the bit that's really for the networks, which is the part of the company that I work for, is helping to accommodate 10 million electric vehicles by 2030, which sounds like a lot, but I think in the next few years, quite a few of us will be thinking about how we can change the sort of vehicle that we are driving. And then in the more sort of overall aspects, we're looking at the fair tax and real living wage. So making sure that we are a fair and equitable employer. And also part of the reason that we're looking at these things is because we are very interested in being part of the ESG group. So looking at the environmental, social and governance parts of our vision, and then also looking at leading on the green recovery. So that's the vision for SSE. And we are split up into 7 different businesses. So we've got our transmission networks, so that's the higher voltage networks. We've got distribution, which is the part that I'm working for. We've got renewables, so that's very much looking at wind and that sort of thing. Thermal, we still have thermal, but we're very much looking at innovation as to how we can decarbonize our thermal fleet, be it through CCS and hydrogen. So there's lots of innovation going on in that area. And then we have various other businesses as well. One that's quite sort of aligned with what we're doing in the distribution space is our EPM, which looks at the markets at the transmission level. So we also have enterprise, and that very much looks at standalone businesses and ways that we can look at things that are outside our regulated base. So those are the 7 companies that we have. And SSEN is the networks, N stands for networks, and it's very much about the transmission and distribution networks that we have across the country. So we own big distribution and transmission networks in the north, very, very north of Scotland, and then we have the southern area right down the bottom. So we are regulated by Ofgem under the Rio framework, and we have a large number of industrial employees and lots of lines and cables, as you can see there on the slide. And we also have subsea cables, which is a project that I was particularly involved in, sort of giving electricity to the islands around Scotland. So that's quite a unique part of our network, which it was interesting to work on. So we're obviously looking at going towards net zero for 2050 with our EV targets, and looking to connect as much renewable generation as we possibly can to the system. So as we move forward, we're very much looking at developing the electricity system of the future, and that's where our innovation comes in, and the way that we're working with some of our innovation projects like LEO. So we want to make sure that we're contributing to the targets for reducing greenhouse gases, but at the same time making sure that whatever we put in place is affordable, reliable, and also sustainable for the future. So this slide here is it's an analogy slide about the electricity system of the future and what a DSO would be. So that's a distribution system operator. So what we're trying to do is get our energy from A to B. And normally if the road or the power line is nice and clear and not too full, then we can drive from A to B, and that's absolutely fine. However, we often find that there is congestion, and the same thing can happen in our power system. We get congestion, so we have to think of ways around this, and some of the options we have include network investment. So we can invest in our network, but this is a quite an expensive way of relieving congestion. So we can think about other solutions that we might be wanting to use. So an example of that would be active management. So that's where we can have sort of traffic lights or motorway corralling. That means that energy can flow in one direction one day and then another direction the next day. We also have our smart solutions and flexible connections. So this would be sort of a time of use analogy that we would use, or shared use. And then we have price signals. So this can be where, you know, if it's slightly more expensive to flow energy at a different part of the day. So a few facts and figures about Oxfordshire. So obviously the project is taking place in Oxfordshire. So I think to give people a bit of an idea as to what our network is like there and how many, you know, substations we have and how many over and underground cables we have. I think the number that draws my attention most is the number of distribution transformers. So that's where we go from the 11 kV level to the LV level, and it gives an idea of the amount of data that needs to be collected in order to manage the network at the local level. So I'm going to give a brief overview of our sort of asset management process, because we are predominantly an asset management company when it comes to being well, we have historically been the sort of more of a passive actor in the energy system. So we've been maintaining our assets, we've been collecting data, performing analytics on that data, and then investing in projects and a whole portfolio of projects to deliver our replacement assets. So you've got a nice picture there of a 33 kV transformer and also a 33 kV overhead line. So those are some of the assets that we are involved in. So it's very much our core business is the asset management, but we are moving more to be DSO, so distribution system operator. And this has quite large implications for our plant and our network. So if our network's going to be loaded more often, then we need to look at the design, for example, of our transformers, because at the moment they are designed to have you know, a peak, whereas that might be less of a thing in the future. We also look at our outages and our outage planning, and that is something that's going to have to be factored into DSO and how we're going to manage outages for the best of the system. And then we also have the age. So the age of our assets influences what value there is left in them, and hence the value of any flexibility. So on top of all this, we also have monitoring equipment. So as part of the project, we are installing monitoring equipment. And as we go into DSO, we'll be having to install more monitoring equipment to gather the data that we need for the project. So another way our network is changing is on the sort of low carbon technology uptake. So as we see more assets connected to the low voltage system, then we will be looking to see how that's going to affect the network. And then there's the more kind of technical aspects. So we're looking at, you know, the grid edge, which hasn't usually been used for things like reverse flow and bidirectional load flows. So there's lots and lots of challenges with the asset management moving into DSO. And these are all the things that we are hoping to trial through LEO. So that is the end of the first section on the sort of Scottish and Southern Energy Networks background and involvement in LEO. So are there any questions at this stage?
I
don't think we've had any questions so far. So yeah,
No
none.
questions.
None come.
Okay, that's
Oh,
fine.
here we go. What could you tell us a little bit more about the transition from DNO to DSO and what that involves?
And what that involves? Yes, yeah, no, absolutely. So at the moment we are mostly a distribution network operator, which means we are custodians of the assets on the system, and we look at the majority of what we do is make sure that they are running reliably, that we've got good security of supply, that they're safe, and everything is changed on time as according to our plan. But as we move into distribution system operations, we're very much looking at using the assets that are connected to the system in order to balance the system. So instead of, say, someone wanting to connect and having to do a lot of reinforcement, we can potentially offer a flexible connection, which means that we don't have to reinforce the network, and then the connection is cheaper. So that's the kind of connections angle. And then we also have the flexibility that we can procure. That means we don't need to reinforce other parts of the network as well. So it's very much about being sort of a dynamic operator of the system, rather than just the load going from the generation straight to the load source.
Thank you, excellent. And we've got a question from Dick Wolf, who said that he's interested in the flow into system from the People's Power Station. I don't know if you're able to talk perhaps a little bit more about that.
Yes, yeah. So People's Power Station is was very much around pulling all of the smaller elements of flexibility together, and meaning that they can then act in a larger way to alleviate system constraints that we might be seeing. So People's Power Station is very much about everyone pulling together to be able to offer those services, as opposed to it just being one provider. So it means that it gets spread a bit more fairly across the community.
And we've got another question from Tom, who says Northern Power Grid have published their community energy engagement strategy. Has SSE?
That's a very good question. I think we do a lot of stakeholder engagement in the more sort of what I would call the business as usual area, but I'm very much focused on LEO at the moment. So yeah, we do have stakeholder engagement strategies. Whether we've got one that's specifically on community energy, I would have to go and have a look at that.
And just to circle back just to the previous question about People's Power Station, the one Mel was just describing is Vision 2, and the one we currently have is sort of just the start of it. So the current one online is this kind of first incarnation, and we are sort of moving more towards the second, which will be quite different, and a bit of a different vision. And we've got another question here from John in Bicester, who says, we have acres of warehouses with no solar PV. As the developer says, the grid can't take the power. A huge solar PV farm covering 7 fields has just been approved, apparently with no problem to the grid. One of these has to be wrong. How can we get more solar PV on all the warehouse roofs?
Yes, yeah, no, that's a good question. I would imagine it's to do with the level at which the solar is connected. So connected at LV will be different to connected at a higher voltage. But yeah, that's part of what we're doing with LEO, is making sure that we can put the solar on the rooftops and get the energy used locally, so that we are balancing out any grid constraints.
Thank you. That's all the questions I believe so far. So yeah, carry on, Mel.
Okay, I shall carry on. Right. So SSEN very much come to LEO as part of transition. So a little bit of background to this, that the Open Networks project, so that's part of the ENA, so the Electricity Networks Association. We're very much looking at getting a project together that was going to help with the transition to DSO. And there were several DNOs who wanted to help with this, and we sort of manage our innovation through a network innovation fund, and they all bid into this fund, and it was decided that we were going to work together in a collaborative venture known as the TEF project collectively. So it's got the transition project in it, it's got EFs, it's known as, which is WPD, and that's the forecasting part. And then we've also got Scottish Power's Fusion project. So they all come together as the TEF project, and they feed directly into the Open Networks project. So the transition project very much looks at the IT and OT systems, that's operational technology, so the communications that we're going to need to enable DSO. So if you can imagine on the system, you've got all this different distributed energy resource, you've got a dynamic system, we need the monitoring in place, and we need the communications between the distributed energy resource and the system to know when to dispatch different sorts of energy. So the whole point of this project was to develop and test those proof of concept systems. But what we didn't have was the participants who we were going to be able to run trials with, and that was how LEO was born. Really, it was bringing the two things together and also looking at the wider sort of community benefit angles that we could get from having a project like LEO. So that's kind of the SSEN part of the project, which is transition, which is the sort of work pack 5 part. So we're very much involved in that and seeing what we can bring to LEO from that side of things. So we also are obviously very interested in how networks can help with the low carbon revolution, because although we're not actually, generating energy, we're not really using energy, we're very much the conduit for the energy. We want to make sure that we are providing the right network at the right cost to enable the transition. So this slide here gives an idea of the sort of changes that we're looking forward to in terms of electric vehicles and heat pumps. So obviously a rise in demand for electricity across the piece, and trying to make sure that we get the balance right between investing in the network for reinforcement and also using flexible solutions in order to get as much of this onto the system as we can. So this slide here, it looks quite complicated, but it's actually showing the interaction between the transition project and the partners that we have in LEO. So at the top, we've got the transition project. So these are all the things that we are developing as part of transition. So a whole system coordinator that is looking at forecasting at the distribution level, look at the analysis that's going to be required, and then looking at activation, dispatch, settlement management, everything that you need in that whole piece for DSO. And then alongside that, we have a market facilitation model, which is going to be looking at collectively bringing together everything that is available in the market and looking to see how we can, use that information to get the best decision for the system. So in LEO, we have Piccolo, who are looking, well, they already have a flexibility exchange that looks at competitions for managing constraints. So that brings quite a good aspect to the project. And then we also have the sort of other technology platforms that are looking more at optimization and aggregation. So we have EDF Energy, they're sort of acting as a supplier, but also it's their innovation arm who are in the project. And we have Nuve, who have their V2G or vehicle to grid technology that they bring to the project. And then in Work Pack 3, we have the distributed energy resource, and that's very much where Low Carbon Hub come in and are able to offer some of their assets into the system for the trials. So that's the kind of technological background to the project and how all the information flows work, and where the transition part of the project sits with everything else. So any questions on that bit?
Yeah, we've had a couple of questions. One just from slightly earlier from Tim, who said that he's read that the National Grid have stated that their carbon intensity dropped, albeit briefly, below 50 grams recently. Is the SSEN 150 by 2030 ambitious enough?
Probably not ambitious enough in current levels. Obviously, with COVID and everything, we've seen an unprecedented drop in demand over the last few months. So that's probably how we've managed to see such a low level coming from National Grid over the last month. So whether that's ambitious enough or not, we will see. I think we're always readjusting and looking to the future. So that's something to keep an eye on.
And we've got another question from Matthew, who says, does the whole system in your whole system coordinator refer to the whole of SSEN's network, or will it interface with the whole UK energy system via the national grid in some way?
It'll mostly be the whole system, as in the kind of the electricity network. I know when lots of people talk about whole system, they're talking cross energy vector now, and the terminology does keep changing. So in this case, it is just the electricity networks, and it will be the electricity networks in our area. But obviously, it's a prototype system, so potentially to be rolled out across the other DNOs. It just depends how it goes in terms of innovation and how the project progresses. So it's very much proof of concept systems that we're developing at the moment, but there will obviously be interfaces and interaction with the ESO. We want to make sure that we're acting joined up and have good coordination with them as well.
Excellent. And we've got sort of a two-parter here from David. It says, is there a tension between optimising within Oxfordshire's physical boundaries and optimising a larger system across multiple counties? And alternatively, will deliberate redundancy be part of the development approach at this stage?
I think we are very much at the moment looking at LEO is in very small sections, so we're starting small and thinking big, starting small and scaling up. I think that's the general terminology, but we are thinking really quite small. So we're looking at 12 primary substations across Oxfordshire at the moment. So we want to get that understood properly before we start thinking about scaling it up. So yes. And is redundancy part of the project? I think there's always going to be a certain amount of that in an innovation project, but we would hope that everything we're doing is generating learning. So even if something doesn't go quite right, then we've learned from it. So that's our general approach on that one.
Fantastic. And that's all the questions we've got at the moment, Mel.
Okay, great. So now moving on to LEO and what we've done in LEO in the first year. Local energy, accelerating net zero. I think that gives a view as to what we're trying to do with LEO. We're very much, it's the first building block in the decarbonisation of Oxfordshire, and just getting all those partners that you can see there around the table is a real first really across the energy industry. There are other projects that have happened, but they haven't had quite the same number of partners as this to be able to bring everything that you need together to actually make good progress at a local level in decarbonisation. So that is a real plus before we'd even got off the ground. So the motivation for LEO, we had a workshop quite early on in the project, and we got people from all the different partners to come in. It was quite a large workshop and looked at the things that we thought were going to be most useful for the project. So the one that came out top was that we wanted to have a local balanced energy system, and that's very much been our focus for year one. And then the whole energy ecosystem, looking at the whole energy ecosystem, and not just the decarbonisation, but the benefits that we could roll out to communities beyond the decarbonisation element. So and that kind of leads into number 3, which is reducing inequalities. So seeing how we can use the learnings from the project to help make sure that everyone can afford the energy that they need. So governance and funding. We are funded by Innovate UK, so part of BEIS, so the Prospering from the Energy Revolution programme, and we're one of 4 demonstrator projects. So there were a few challenges in the first 6 months. So this is the first time that an Ofgem funded work stream has merged with a BEIS funded work stream. So there are a few challenges with getting Innovate UK to understand the way that Ofgem funded our transition project. We had, like everyone, we had a few, it takes a while to get the projects off the ground. You get the big green button, and then you have to go out and do all your recruitment and all the rest of it. So it takes a bit of time to get all of that sort of thing sorted out. But we have a strong governance that you can see there. We have the plug-in projects board, which looks very much at all the projects that are coming in the pipeline. We have a delivery board that meets monthly and runs through everything that's going on in the project with Innovate UK. And we also have a strong stakeholder advisory board that has drawn together people from across the industry. So not just what we'd call the normal suspects. So not just people from transmission, distribution, Ofgem BEIS, but also people a bit more wide ranging. So we've got people from Grosvenor Homes on there, for example. So so it's good because it gives a really sort of well-rounded opinion of what it is we're doing and what we need to focus on and how we're going to move the project forwards. So the first year, so we've done quite a lot of work in the first year. We've tested the activity of our market platforms. So we've developed a procedure, an end-to-end procedure for the need and then the sort of dispatch and settlement of energy. We've looked at the generation assets that we're going to need to trial. And we've also looked at the sort of network constraints that there exist in Oxfordshire. And we've managed to put all this through the market rules and IT requirements for the DSO. So we've employed the minimum viable system concept. So this is very much an agile project management system. And it means that although we start off the project and we are setting everything up, we are still able to do some trials and get some learning out as we go through. So we've got 3 sort of main work streams for MVSs. We've got the ones around operations, so looking at the flexibility services, be that for storage, generation, demand side response or aggregation. And then we've got ones around planning. So we're just looking at the moment at the mapping tool in Oxfordshire and how that can help us. And then we have, some of the outcomes that we're expecting from the project are looking at the sort of policy and regulation side of the project. So one of the key things we've done is develop the 14-step end-to-end procedure, which I was just talking about for constraint identification, all the way through to settlement. So that is the steps that need to be gone through for a DSO to really be able to deploy the flexibility that's on its system. So first of all, we need to work out what the service need is. So we have, some areas in Oxfordshire are constrained. We have our heat maps and they show where you'll be able to connect easily and where not quite so easily. And we've had a few workshops around identifying the need for flexibility and also areas that we're going to be able to actually have assets and be able to procure flexibility. So in order for the process to work, we need to be able to get the constraints registered on the system. So that's the first thing to do. And Piccolo have a system that will do this for us. And we already have quite a few assets that are sitting on that system, and they have a separate system that is just for the LEO project. So that is a good thing that we're able to use. We also look at the provider being able to register what they need with the DSO, so what the parameters is of the distributed energy resource that's going to be needed for flexibility, and then depending on how that goes, because you may find that your asset isn't in the right postcode zone, or it's not in the right zone for the constraint. So if that works well, then we can potentially contract with them for some flexibility. So we then have the delivery side. So if the service provider bids into the auction and they are successful, then we're able to dispatch the energy, and then that can be delivered according to the kind of agreed baseline methodology. So I think we've got a few examples coming up as to when we've actually done this. So monitoring is a big part of the validation. So you can see the picture there of someone installing an LV monitor in one of our LV pillars. So this measures the parameters at the secondary substation. And then we've got a very smiley picture there of Brian Wan, who is the transition project manager, and Adriano, and that is their settlement. And because this is obviously a trial, the settlement amount was £1. So that was the first one was settled at £1. So very much for research purposes. And you know, as you can see there, everyone has enjoyed these trials so far.
Just a quick question, Mel. Is service provider a generator or something demanding energy? That's from...
That's a good question. So a service provider can be either, and we're just about to get onto that. So it can be any device connected to the system that changes the energy. You know, it can either reduce its normal load, or it can be a generator that increases load, or it can be a battery that can do either. So anything that can provide flexibility into the system. So for the minimum viable systems, we're looking at being able to test all the different sorts of dispatchability that we might want. So for example, we've got here batteries, so that was one I was just talking about, and they can either suck energy in or take energy out of the grid, so they're quite handy. We've got Sanford Hydro, which is generation. We've got the Sackler library, which is more of a demand side response, so that's measuring against the baseline. And then we also want to test aggregation, so being able to sum up lots of smaller demand side response and seeing what that does to the network. So yeah. So we've done 3 trials so far. The first one was at the Oxford Bus Company, and we were able to control the energy there for an hour coming out of the battery. So it's really handy to be able to see from the trace there, the impact that we can have on the low voltage system, because we're not used to energy going that way. It usually goes, from the central area down to the sort of load centers. So it's really good learning to be able to see how quickly these assets can dispatch, and it helps us to then plan for the future when, if we wanted to use this sort of flexibility in anger, how it would actually work. So the next one that we did was Sanford Hydro, and like all things, it doesn't always go 100% smoothly, but we managed to learn from what we trial. So I think the first dispatch there was a partial delivery due to a slight fault, but we were able to try rerunning the process, and there, because it is hydro, it's obviously very dependent on the river levels, so there was a lot of learning there around availability and being able to make it known to the DSO what your availability was before there was going to be any dispatch. So again, we've got another trace there of what happened on that particular trial. And the other ones that we're looking at are Oxford behind the meter. So this is more demand side response. So very much looking at, what is the baseline, and therefore what is the difference from the baseline when we do our flex event. So I think this is one of the ones where you think it's going to be quite straightforward, but then building management systems are overly complicated. So although we thought it would be quite straightforward, it actually ended up being a little bit delayed because we had to override one of the systems on site. So yeah, but it's all good learning, and it's all very much about the engagement and the stakeholder engagement, and making sure that the people who are running the assets understand what's required, so that in the future when we do it again, it'll all go a bit more smoothly. So this map here you will no doubt recognise, which is Oxfordshire, but with the top cut off. So if anyone's wondering why the top isn't there, that'll be because that is WPD's area, so it's not any of our substations there. So that map there shows the sort of reach of all of our primary substations in Oxfordshire. And we're very much looking at developing sort of markets, so markets behind the primary substations. So in order to do that, we need a collection of assets behind each primary substation, so that we can demonstrate the services that we need to demonstrate for the transition project. So those system services are very much around sort of peak and constraint management. So peak is as it sounds. If you've got a lot of energy being required at the peak and you want to manage that, then you can either use demand side response or turn up generation. And then for constraint management, that's more around faults, and also things like planned maintenance. So we might want to contract with a local renewable energy resource rather than using, say, a standby diesel generator, for example. So those are all good examples of system services. We also have the interaction with store. I don't know if everyone knows what store is. So that's short-term operating reserve, and that is very much an ESO service. So that's at transmission level. And what we're trying to trial there is the kind of interaction between the ESO markets and the DSO markets, and seeing whether we can stack services and have them both operating at the same time. So those are the kind of system services. And then we also have the more sort of energy exchange services that we want to be trialing. So they are capacity trading and offsetting, with capacity trading being what it sounds. So that's the kind of what your connected capacity is. You can potentially exchange that between maybe two solar PV farms. If they've got outages, then they could exchange their capacity and then be able to flow more energy than they would otherwise be able to. And then offsetting is similar, but very much about the energy rather than just the capacity. So this is very much an evolving market. So at the moment, there aren't really any rules around dispatchability, around flexibility, around failure to deliver, and all those sorts of things. So we have run a series of market games where we've had sort of a different workshops where we've been able to have people from across the electricity industry play a different role in the flexibility market, and everyone's given a portfolio of assets to trade between themselves to see whether they can break the market rules that we've put out. So that's been good, and we've written up the learning from that, and that's on the transition website. So site selection, monitoring and energy planning, we're very much looking at selecting the sites behind the 12 primaries. We've got LV monitors to put in the secondary substations, so that when we are doing our flex events, we can see how it's affecting the system, and very much looking at recruiting enough assets to be able to demonstrate that working in anger. So the technology types, we've looked at, all different sorts of technology types, but I think we've got most of the types that we're going to need. There's obviously more solar in Oxfordshire than other types of energy. So we'll be looking at that and, hoping that there aren't too many gaps in our technology types. So looking across the sort of local area energy plans, very much sort of whole system thinking. So looking at, decarbonising the electricity system, and then potentially transport, and then heat. So trying to make sure that, we're looking across the board and thinking about energy, as in the broadest sense rather than just electricity. And then thinking about, especially, coming out of COVID, how we can invest jobs in the green economy and boost investor confidence in green tech. So yeah, so our minimum viable systems we have put into different categories, so that as we are moving forwards with the project, we can see how each of them reacts differently to the flexibility events that they are providing. So as part of our site selection, we've tried to select sites that reflect different situations. So for example, we might have one that is off the gas grid, we might have one that is in centre of Oxford, other ones where there's likely to be a lot of new housing being built. So we've tried to choose areas where we're going to be able to trial lots of different scenarios. And then we have the different sorts of categories. So if you are a prosumer, or whether you're a generation asset, whether we're looking at a smart neighborhood, so that might have a a key project and then various other smaller projects around the side that are trying to sort of balance that off and see if we can balance the energy at the local level. And then aggregation, so that's a bit like the People's Power Station. That's going to be a powerful tool when it comes to flexibility. And then if there's a portfolio of a diverse portfolio that is owned by one person, then that can potentially be bid into the flexibility markets as well.
Mel, could you just clarify the term prosumer for us?
Prosumer. Yeah, lots of people don't like that one. It's just to differentiate from consumer, where a consumer might be a passive actor on the electricity network, whereas a prosumer might be a bit more engaged with the whole decarbonisation agenda and have invested in solar panels or low carbon, heat pumps, or wanting to be getting an electric vehicle. So that's the kind of the difference between the consumer and the prosumer.
Excellent, thank you.
Okay. So yes, so this is very much the time frame that we've got for LEO. We're at the moment in our MVS plus stage, so we've done the MVS development, but obviously we've had COVID, so we haven't been able to get out on the ground quite as much as we would like. We're hoping, over July, August time, we'll be able to get back out and start running some more of these trials. And we're very much moving towards the full trials for transition. So at the moment we are in the tender process for procuring the IT and OT systems for transition, and then once they've been procured and built, then we'll be able to start running the full trials for transition. So so at the moment we're in MVS plus, and then we'll be working towards our preparatory trials for those full trials taking place. And they're very much about demonstrating not only that the tech works, but also about the markets and how the market would be likely to behave in a true DSO flexibility market. So looking at the pricing and the pricing signals and the contracts and the other things that come about as part of operating a market, as well as getting all the technology right. So that is the key timeline for the project. And then on top of that, we have the sort of smart and fair element. So we're working with the Centre for Sustainable Energy to make sure that no one's getting left behind. I was speaking before about the prosumer consumer difference. You know, some people are going to be very engaged with this, and they're potentially going to be able to benefit massively from the energy transition, but maybe at the expense of people who are not able to do that. So the Centre for Sustainable Energy is very much looking through its capability lens at the different aspects that are going to affect that. So whether that be someone's financial situation or how they interact with tech, for example. So some people are very savvy with apps and all the rest of it, and other people are just, you know, as soon as they see enter your username and password, run in the opposite direction. So there's a little bit of an acceptance piece there. And then there's also, you know, what sort of a house you live in. If you're not in an owner occupied house, then you're less likely to be able to participate in the energy transition. So we're looking very much at you know, an ethical framework that we can produce that will make sure that it's you know, a fair and equitable transition for everybody. So we've had lots of interest in LEO over the past year. I was fortunate enough to go to European Utility Week in Paris with Innovate UK and present on LEO. So that generated quite a lot of interest from you know, quite far afield, and we were able to, from that meeting, bring in Mitsubishi and TEPCO, so that's the Tokyo Electric Power Company, came to visit LEO on a fact-finding mission. So they were very interested in how we were managing our local energy system, and specifically in electric vehicles, and how they can potentially, you know, in Tokyo, which is one of the most densely populated cities on the planet, how they could learn some things from Oxford. So we were looking at that, and we've also had MPs, and we've had visits from the Climate Change Committee, and an article in the Financial Times. And we were also in for an award. I think it was Collaborative Energy Project of the Year with the Network 2020 Awards, but unfortunately that's been postponed now till October, I think. So we don't know yet whether we've actually won an award yet for LEO, but we've got our fingers crossed. Yeah, and now I'm on to the COVID situation and post-COVID, and how, you know, projects like LEO are really going to be informing how we can move forwards and how we can move out of COVID and into a green recovery. You know, there's been a lot of disruption over the last few months. I think most of us will be working from home. We've seen the rollout of digital technology across our own companies, you know, across the health service. All these things that we thought were going to take, you know, maybe 5 years to embed have suddenly been done overnight. So there's been quite a lot of positive things that have come out of this. And one of the positive things is obviously the amount of energy that we're using has gone down, so less pollution and less you know, damage to the environment. But also on the markets side, it's doing interesting things to prices in terms of energy prices. And if you've been following the energy news, you'll have seen that there have been a few instances of people being paid to charge up their cars at certain times because of the electricity system having too much energy in it. So yeah, so there's lots of opportunities I see coming up in the next few months. You know, everyone is more focused on local now as well as part of COVID. You know, lots of people haven't actually been more than, if you're in Scotland anyway, more than 5 miles from their homes in the last few months. So I think there's definitely been a focus on, you know, supporting your local shops and that sort of thing. And I think the same can be said for the energy. So there's lots of domestic supply chain opportunities coming out of this. And really the other thing we want to do is create jobs. You know, the green army, I think we're going to be calling it. People who are maybe, you know, unfortunate and not able to keep the job they've had. If we can create jobs in this area now, and get investment to you know, make sure that the decarbonisation happens quicker, then that's going to be a good thing. So So a bit of a summary slide on LEO. So we're looking very much at, you know, trying to work out the policy that's going to be impacted by the energy transition. So if there's any regulatory or policy issues that we're coming across, those are getting fed through to Ofgem and BEIS. We're very much looking at the replicability of LEO as well. So looking to see if there are other areas where we'll be able to you know, do the same sort of thing again. So that's something that we're very keen to encourage. Looking at the community energy and social enterprise, I think Low Carbon Hub is, you know, very much at the forefront of the you know, the decarbonisation and the energy transition. And I think looking at the replication, we don't really have that in very many other places. So that is a key role that's being fulfilled here. And from our point of view, as the network operator, knowing more about the grid edge. So for us, that's the LV system. We need to, you know, get a lot more knowledge on that side of the system, and also the smart and fair neighbourhoods. So that's very much the neighbourhood and locality pulling together to manage their own kind of energy situation. So I hope that's been useful, and a handy run through of what we're doing with LEO in the first year and where SSEN and SSEN sit in the project. That's the website there if anyone wants any more information. We've recently published I think it's our 5th newsletter, and that's up there with everything that we've been doing over the past quarter. So please go through and have a look at that. And yeah, so thanks very much for listening.
That's excellent. Thank you so much, Mel. We've got about 5 minutes left just to whiz through a couple of questions. So we've got one here from Malcolm McCulloch, who's asked, what happens after the 3 years?
Well, hopefully before the end of the 3 years, we'll have set up a group of people who are able to look at bidding into the next round of funding, so that we can perpetuate LEO and so that it can continue for at least another 3 years.
Sure. And another question is sort of say the approach, sometimes it can seem a little bit reactive, and has there been any more work done sort of determining what's needed to achieve net zero by 2050 and in more interim targets?
I think that we are, you know, obviously that is the trajectory that we want to go on. I think if you start working backwards as to what we actually need to do to achieve that, it's surprising, you know, how rapidly we are going to have to move. So there's going to have to be some pretty good leadership from you know, from the government, and you know, this green recovery is a really good opportunity to, you know, start putting some more investment into renewables and into you know, decarbonisation, so they can actually meet those targets.
And we've got another question from John here saying, are you part of the Oxfordshire 2050 Work with the Growth Board and Local Enterprise Partnership, as well as the Oxfordshire Infrastructure Plan?
I think we are looking at being involved in as many of these other sort of things that are happening in Oxfordshire as we possibly can. So I think probably that's more likely that the councils will be the people who are involved in that as part of the project. So yes, we will be wanting to reach out to everybody in Oxfordshire to help with this project.
And Tim asks, is there a simple metric that could be used to indicate whether LEO is being successful?
Yes, it's not a simple project, so it's quite hard to have a simple metric, but yes, I think it'll be around, you know, the key things that I've got up there: the community, the markets, and the technology. So if we could have a metric for each of those, I think that would, you know, work out whether it was being successful or not. So for the technology, it would be things like the number of you know, number of IT/OT events that you've managed to have, the number of flexibility events and how successful they've been. For the markets, it would be around the number of kilowatt hours or kilowatts that you've managed to deploy through the market. And then for the community angle, it would be around, you know, how many communities you've engaged with and how positive that has been.
Excellent. And I think we're nearing the end of the questions. Got another one here from Dave. So, could software used in the project be made open source so that independent software developers could chip in with useful suggestions for perhaps improvements or adaptations?
Yeah, I mean, open data is something that we're always looking at, as part of our project, so that we can be more, collaborative. So yeah, so any sort of help that we would want from that would be welcome. So yeah, whether we can actually look at the actual specs, I'm not sure. I'd have to go and check for that, but yeah, it's a good idea.
And I think it's good. Final question from me. What is it that makes Oxfordshire such an ideal place for this project to be taking place?
Well, I think for us, it's very much the sort of the way that it's at the Oxfordshire's at the cutting edge of all things, kind of, I don't know, forward-looking, innovative. It's got all the clever people, It's got all the community, all the drive for decarbonisation. It's just got the passion, I think, probably for driving things forwards. That probably the passion and the capability, and the leadership, which you don't really see in other areas quite as prevalently. I mean, yeah, I think Oxfordshire's special for that reason. So yes, I think the fact that it's sort of leading the way in community energy and bringing people together to sort of take ownership themselves of their energy communities. I think that's a new sort of way of looking at things that isn't prevalent elsewhere.
Excellent. Well, on behalf of everyone watching, Mel, thank you so much for your time this
You're
evening. It's been
welcome,
really
Zoe. Thank you
interesting,
very much.
really fantastic. And thanks to everyone for joining. Stay, keep in touch with our website. Do email us if you've got any questions, info@lowcarbonhub.org. Next week, we've got our community coffee morning, 11 a.m, 16th of June, part of Community Energy England's Community Energy Fortnight. And the week after that, we'll have a couple more webinars on more Project Leo aspects, which you can find out on our website. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, that's good. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.